Hello, and welcome to Continuing Education, a podcast for homeschoolers with actually useful information. I'm Heidi, and today we're going to be talking about choosing a curriculum. When you live in the homeschool circles or you walk among the homeschoolers long enough, you will inevitably find that the most common question is, what's the best curriculum? And I get really excited at that question, but it also kind of makes me sad, and here's why. When I hear that question being asked by a parent, I am really excited that there is a potential homeschooler, a future homeschooler that is a parent that's about to embark on something really fun. It's exciting to be a homeschooling parent and to be able to teach your kids things and to see them kind of awaken their knowledge right there in front of you. And you're like, wow, I did that. That's really cool. But the sad part of it is that they will quickly get the response that either that question is too broad because the answer is there is no best curriculum, or they will get 100 different parents telling them 100 different curriculums, which quickly will feel overwhelming. And as a new homeschooling parent, having the courage to pull your kid from school and decide to homeschool is a lot. And so when you walk into the homeschool space and you realize that there are so many curriculum choices out there, it is easy to feel immensely overwhelmed by all the research you now have to do to find the best one. So I kind of want to preface this conversation by saying there is no best curriculum. And while you may feel a sense of urgency when choosing curriculum, you know, maybe you've pulled your kid from school and you're trying to get them back into the academic path as quickly as possible. It doesn't have to be urgent. This is a process that you will do over and over again. So every semester or every year or when your kids' needs change, you're going to reevaluate your curriculum and you're going to have to make the decision of, do I keep this? Is it still working for us? Or can I toss it and pick up something new? So it's okay to take a moment to kind of evaluate your options and figure out what curriculum might work best for you right now. So just keep in mind that as you're choosing curriculum, whatever you choose, it is not final and you are not stuck. As an add-on to that, I will say, whatever you choose, know that if it didn't work, that does not make you a failure. I say this because from experience that I have chosen curriculums that did not work for my family. And after a semester of using it, I felt awful that I'd wasted a semester of our time, that it made my kid feel stupid. And I felt like a failure. But the truth is that we make the best decision with the information we have at the time. And what makes us a great parent is that we're willing to take the information that we learn and adjust going forward. So when you choose a curriculum that didn't work for you, that does not mean that you are a failure. And that does not mean that you are a bad homeschooling parent. It does not mean that you need to give up. It does mean that you can gather new information and find something else that works, because there is no shame, there's no embarrassment in tossing a curriculum that didn't work for you anymore and picking up something new. So just know that this process happens over and over again. And if you don't get it right the first time, that's okay, because it is rare that you choose a curriculum at the very beginning of your homeschooling journey and that you keep it throughout your entire homeschooling years. Okay, so let's move into the criteria that I like to think about when I'm evaluating curriculum. And the first one is I determine whether I want a religious or a secular curriculum. Then I kind of consider my kiddo's learning style. And then I determine the format that the curriculum is in. So let's start with religious versus secular. And I'll preface this section by saying this podcast is for everyone. We love all of our homeschoolers, whether you're choosing to homeschool for religious reasons or whether you're a secular homeschooler, we love everyone. And so we are going to cover the differences today, but know that there is no bad choice based on your family's needs. There's no best choice based on your family's needs. It's just what your family needs. So religious curriculum is what we're going to start with. So this kind of curriculum is going to be emphasizing teachings from a specific religion or religious denomination. So the most common one is that you will see religious texts, stories, scriptures, teachings, people as part of the core curriculum. And I'll give you an example. So Apologia Astronomy, we picked that curriculum up one year. And as part of the kind of academic portion of the text, the big paragraphs that are in the middle of the page, it included texts like, God created all the planets, and then he spun the planets around the sun. So they're including that into the academic text. There are also religious curriculums that, rather than including it in kind of the text format, they may include it in the margins. They might just include a little scripture on the side or an inspirational quote. They might just do something kind of on the side or in a devotional. Maybe they might have something like, every Friday do a little devotional and here's a devotional, but it's not part of the actual academic curriculum. So that's something to keep in mind as you're evaluating religious texts, is how integrated it is and if you are okay with that. So academic curriculums are typically those they're usually favored by families who prioritize religious instruction and they want their kids' education to really align closely with their faith. Secular curriculum, on the other hand, it is in shorter supply. There are not as many secular curriculums. It does not incorporate religious teachings or beliefs into the core curriculum. And instead, it focuses on academic subjects without any kind of religious influence. So you will often also find that secular curriculums will state that they adhere to state or national education standards more frequently. So, for example, I'm in Texas. In the public school system, they follow the TEKS guidelines, which is basically what teachers are required to teach every year in the public school. There are some curriculums that are kind of advertised towards Texas homeschoolers, and they will say, we follow the TEKS guidelines. And that helps me know as a parent, they followed what they're doing in public school. So if maybe one day I think my kid might return to public school, or I just want to make sure that I'm covering everything I need to, that might be a good indicator for me that that's a good curriculum, because then I know that they're covering what I think they need to be covering. That's particularly helpful in Texas. We're not very regulated, but it is particularly helpful in other states because there are a lot of states that more closely regulate what you do. They're wanting you to write down hours and what you're covering, the type of instruction you have. So those kinds of curriculum that can state that they follow those guidelines can be much more helpful. I have found that secular curriculum tends to be more inclusive of different viewpoints and inclusive of diversity. So in some secular curriculums, I have seen pictures of kiddos in wheelchairs or minority children more frequently. That's just been my own finding within secular curriculum. Secular curriculum tends to be more suitable for families who are looking for a neutral or a non-religious approach. Maybe they're religious, but they just want to separate that religious instruction from their academic learning. So a lot of families who are religious may use secular curriculum, but then they use their religious instruction. Like I said, they may incorporate a devotional. They may do something in the evenings or just kind of use their Sunday services to make sure that religious instruction gets out there. I do want to say there is a subcategory of secular curriculum, and it's called neutral or faith neutral. So this typically means that they either leave out controversial topics entirely, or they cover them both with the viewpoint that they're both equally valid. So here's an example. So Book Shark is considered, it's commonly people say that it's secular, but it actually is faith neutral. And in there, if you go and read more about their curriculum, they state, our science and history programs do not teach evolution, creationism, or intelligent design theory. Now, you may have no problem with that, or you may, but that's something that you need to be aware of, that even in secular curriculums, they may say that they're secular, but what they may really be is faith neutral, where they just stray away from the controversial subjects. And so if you have a kiddo, maybe even an older kiddo, because it's probably more relevant when your kids get into older grades. If you have a kiddo who's really into science and they don't teach evolution, which is kind of considered kind of a scientific standard theory, then that may be something you want to know about as that child progresses in their science awesomeness. So not bad, not good, just something you should know about. And then you can decide, do I need to insert that in, or am I okay with just leaving it out? So just something to be aware of. All right. Moving right along to learning style. So after I determine whether I want a religious or a secular curriculum, that immediately filters out a bunch of curriculums for me, and I can move on to learning style. Learning styles refers to the way that your kiddo prefers to approach new learning tasks or take in new information. So when you think of learning styles, you probably think of the top three. You think of visual, you think of auditory, and you think of kinesthetic. I'm going to add two other categories, and that is that they're social learners or independent learners. And we're going to talk about all of these, but I just wanted to throw all five of those out. Also, know that as you're kind of evaluating learning style, one, you may not know what your child's learning style is. You may not know your learning style. I didn't for a long time. And then I would say that I've also kind of changed throughout time. So it's something that you may not know that may also change, or they may have kind of a combination of 2 or 3 learning styles, but they kind of have a primary one and then some secondary ones, right? So when you think about learning style, know that this isn't just like a black and white answer. There's lots of shades of gray here. And so you kind of have to evaluate holistically. Do they need just primarily this one way of learning? Do I need to incorporate multiple ways of learning? All right, let's start with visual learners. So just to recap, visual learners prefer to process information through images, diagrams, charts, or other visual aids. So they benefit from seeing information presented in a visual format. They like to look at it. They have a strong ability to remember things that they see and all the details the way that they see it. So they may also, but not always, but they may also like to read, is because then they can see the written text. So if your kid is a visual learner, they may be taking a test, for example, and then in their mind, they're remembering where on the page they saw some information in order to answer a question. That is kind of an example of a visual learner, that they kind of visualize information. That's how they remember it and then process that information. Auditory learners are a little bit different. They learn best through listening and speaking. They may prefer things like lectures or discussions or audiobooks. They like to do a lot of talking, and they process through talking or through listening information. They also have a strong ability to remember information that they've heard. So you may have heard people who pop onto the piano and they can quickly remember a tune. They may have a strong auditory learning component. The next category is kinesthetic and tactile learners. So these are the people who like their hands-on activities, their physical experiences. They like to climb. They like to touch. These are people who like to move things and manipulate things. So they might be good with Play-Doh, or they might be like picking up blocks and building things. They may benefit from things like experiments or role-playing or building models. You may also see that they like to write information and then organize that. So, for example, tactile learners will be ones who take in information, they write it down, but then they might organize it into outlines or lists. That helps them better understand that information. All right, so those are the top 3. 2 more that I want you to consider, and that is social learners and individual learners. So social learners are those that thrive in group settings. They really enjoy their interactions with others. They might like a classroom full of kids, and they enjoy the sensory experience of being around that. They really prefer those collaborative activities or group discussions or cooperative learning where they're having to kind of do things as a group. And they benefit from working in groups or participating in kind of that peer teaching or multiple people interactions. Individual learners tend to be a little bit more solitary. They like to work alone. They process the information independently. So they kind of think to themselves. These are your deep thinkers who are kind of processing that information internally without talking out loud and bouncing off ideas off each other, right? They typically enjoy things like self-paced learning because then they can go at their own approach. They can think it through in the way that works best for them. They like to study by themselves. They like reflective exercises where they can think about a topic and kind of think it through the way that they like to and kind of go through all the different nuances to themselves. They tend to benefit from quieter environments where there's not a lot of distractions, a lot of noise, or a lot of movement around them. So
one of the most common things that's next is, okay, great, I know the learning styles, but then how do I figure that out for my child? There's tons of quizzes online where you can kind of try to figure this out for your child, but I'm going to throw a couple of different things at you just to get you pondering as you kind of figure that out for your kid best. So the first one, obviously, when your child is learning something new, what do they prefer to do? Do they like to watch videos or look at pictures about the topic? Do they like to listen to explanations or have discussions? Do they like hands-on activities or experiments? Or do they like to read books or articles? In group settings, what does your child enjoy doing the most? Do they watch the presentations? Are they participating in the discussions? Are they working on an experiment? Or are they reflecting and thinking independently and kind of being alone on the side? So a common way to observe this is you take your kid to like a library activity. What are they doing? Are they in the middle of it, or are they on the side kind of thinking through things through on their end? Are they raising their hand to volunteer for some kind of hands-on experiment, or are they just enjoying watching the demonstration that's happening, right? The next one is when your child needs to remember something important, what strategy do they use? So are they creating colorful diagrams? Are they repeating the information out loud or making up a song about it? Do they act out the information or physically practice it? Or are they writing down notes and making lists? And then finally, how does your kiddo prefer to spend their free time? Are they watching movies, documentaries, or YouTube videos? Are they listening to music, podcasts, or audiobooks? Do they like to play sports or build things or go outside and climb? Or maybe are they reading books, writing stories, or drawings? So those are kind of 4 questions to kind of walk through to figure out, okay, what is my kid best? What do they like best? And how would they best learn new information? Coupled with that, as a homeschooling parent, you will probably be required to learn new things so that you can reteach it to your child. It's probably helpful for you also to learn about your learning style. So just something to be aware of. The next thing that I consider when I'm looking at curriculum is what format does it need to be in? Should it be a digital thing that they do on the computer or the iPad? Or should it be in print, like a book-based curriculum? Or should it be a combination of both? So there's lots of curriculums that actually will have a combination of both. And that's good, because that means that, mid-year through, if you realize, oh, wow, my kid's not really thriving with the online portion, you just pull out those books and they can continue on with the same curriculum. Some curriculums don't have that. So just figure out which format works best for you, and then you can kind of filter out curriculums that don't have those formats. But as you're considering that, here are some other things to consider. So when you're considering the format, do they have other resources? So do they have, if your kiddo is the kind of kiddo who really likes lots of videos, does the digital format have a video component? Or do they have other interactive activities or multimedia content? Is the curriculum easy to use? So in digital world, sometimes the software can be clunky and complex, and younger kids may not be able to navigate very easily, or even older kids might not be able to easily find the work that they're supposed to work on that day. Even in book formats, a lot of curriculums will list, if you look at the syllabus, they'll have, okay, day 1, you need to read from this book and then complete the questions from this book. And it requires them to retrieve 2, 3, 4 different books every day. Is that too complex for your kiddo? If it is, you may need to choose a different curriculum because that one's not suitable for your kid to be able to navigate. I have a kiddo who likes to work independently. So for me, being able to find a curriculum that's easy to use, that they can easily do on their own, that doesn't require them to pick up 4 different books, is really important. So that's just something to be aware of, is can my child navigate the technology that's required for this? Or are they having to grab too many items to complete this work? Is it confusing? How is it structured? So one thing, as you work with your kid, you may realize that they have preferences on how they get feedback.
I have one kiddo who, when they do online work, they get the big red X, and that gives them a lot of anxiety, seeing that they got something wrong. That immediate feedback is a little bit jarring. And so for that reason, being able to pick up something in a book and work that way, or doing the work with them online so that I can kind of help prevent them from getting that wrong answer and instead have the discussion with them, is a good way to structure that kind of curriculum. So just keep in mind, how are they getting the feedback, and is the way that they're getting feedback appropriate for them so that they're wanting to keep learning. The other thing that I like to consider in both formats is, can my child move on when they get the concept? So some curriculums, they'll teach a concept, then they have you practice the concept, and then they might have you practice it a few more days. But if my child gets the concept, I don't want them spending time. This is just my own personal preference. We kind of have a no busy work rule in our home. So once they master the concept, I don't need them spending any other time on working on that concept. Once they demonstrate they master it, I want them to be able to move on. So if you choose an online curriculum and it doesn't allow your child to move on once they've mastered the concept, or it doesn't allow you to override it so that they can move on once they've mastered the concept, that may not be the right choice for you if you value being able to move on. That's something that we really value, and so that's something that I like to evaluate is, can I move on? Can I override whatever setting to make sure my kid can learn the next thing? So those are kind of things to consider when you're thinking about the format is, can my child easily navigate it? How does it give feedback? Can I manipulate it so that I can have them move on or revisit topics if they need to? So once you've those are the basic 3 things that I use to kind of narrow down the curriculum that I'm choosing. And then you will probably be down to maybe 2 or 3 choices. So you're going to be evaluating, maybe your Beast Academy with your Math UC, 2 common math curriculums, right? And you're wanting to decide, okay, between these 2 or 3 curriculums that I now have narrowed it down to, which one is best? So here are kind of some maybe not as important topics or things that you can kind of evaluate to determine what might be the best choice. The first one is your teaching style. So it is common in homeschooling that you are going to have to relearn a topic that you probably haven't seen in 20 years, but you need to learn it and be able to teach it to your child. And so for me, being able to have a teacher's guide that will help me understand the way that they're teaching it in the curriculum, and I can use the language of the curriculum to teach my child, is important. I like having a teacher's guide so that I can reteach that information when needed. Consider your time commitment. Some curriculums are open and go, which means that you literally open the book and you start on page 1 and it tells you what to do all through it. Whereas some curriculum requires you to pre-plan. They'll require you to gather materials or to to create some kind of lap book or flashcards or whatever it may be. So choose which one is best for you. If you have a curriculum that requires pre-planning, know that means that you're going to need to pre-plan. So every Sunday or whatever, you're going to need to get out all your materials, make sure you have it, and plan out the week. So just be aware of that and what your time commitment allows you to do. The next thing to consider, obviously, is your curriculum going to meet your state requirements? And how do you track it? So again, I'm here in Texas. They require basically nothing. But some of our higher regulation states require you to use certain curriculums that adhere to certain guidelines, and they require you to track a certain number of hours. So you want to make sure that those curriculums that you choose adhere to those guidelines, and that you know beforehand how you're going to track it, rather than trying to come at the end of the year and fill in all this paperwork that you need to submit. You want to be able to track it through the year to save yourself some time. The next thing is the curriculum rigorous enough? There's a lot of curriculum out there that we've chosen in the past, curriculums that were formatted really nicely, and on the page it was easy to read and it had enough pictures and graphics to explain the concept, but it wasn't very rigorous, and I had to add in additional content in order to really kind of elevate the learning experience for my child, that I really just wanted them to get a little bit more out of it. Or is it too rigorous? Will I need to pull things out? Does it have too many assignments? Is it flexible for me to pull that out? So just something to keep in mind as you're evaluating curriculum. Obviously, you're also going to want to consider the cost. There are several free curriculums. When you get cheaper, it typically requires more from the parent. So just know that as you get cheaper, you're probably going to need to spend some time to pre-plan and to print things out and to pull out your URLs to give to your child. It might not be as easy for them to navigate independently. So just keep that in mind. As things get a little bit more expensive, it tends to be a little bit more easier to navigate and have a little bit more parent support. By parent support, I mean that you have teams that are dedicated to helping you use that curriculum, that software, that book, whatever it may be. And that's something to consider too, is does this provide parent support? Also, what kind of reviews and feedback do you hear from other parents? So one of the common things that I like to do when I'm evaluating a curriculum and I'm thinking maybe I'm going to choose this one, I'll go into Google and I'll type in the name of curriculum followed by VS, versus, right? And it's going to pull up some other competing curriculums. And I'm just going to double check, have I evaluated these other curriculums? Because typically they're aligning you up with other curriculums that are similar. So that's just something to, something you could do. The last thing that I might consider is the curriculum diverse and is it current? So in our family, it's really important that we have a wide variety of viewpoints and cultures and backgrounds and perspectives. And so I want to see images and viewpoints and thoughts from all different kinds of people. And so I'll consider whether or not the curriculum is diverse. And I like to know that it's up to date with our most recent events. So does it stay up to date with the latest information? Is the science relevant? Is it current? Or was this curriculum made 20 years ago? So just something to consider. So those are the main things that I like to cover when I'm choosing curriculum. Again, there are, I went through a ton of things and I'm super sorry for covering so much because it is overwhelming, or it can be overwhelming, but know that whatever you choose, will give you more information to make the next choice when you need to, if you need to. You may choose the best one perfectly at the first time, or it may be an abysmal failure. Either way, you have made a wonderful choice by starting and evaluating curriculums, and whatever you choose does not make you a failure. So thank you for listening to Continuing Education. We'd love to hear more thoughts on topics that you'd like us to cover. Let us know, and we look forward to seeing you next time.